I'm Martin. This is Nassif.
Hey, good morning, folks.
And Jaume, if we can just turn us down a little bit, thank you. I don't want to blow you all out. So we're here to talk about threat hunting and incident response with all the products that you see up on the screen. Can you just, I'm interested to know, raise your hand if you own one of these products. Because that's why I named it this. I was thinking you'll see the thing you're using and you'll say, this is what I want to come learn about. So I've been working in security operations since the mid-2000s, back when crimeware, we were just starting to figure out that crimeware was involved in cybersecurity and there was organized crime behind all of it. And since then, I've built out our Cisco CSIRT, our incident response team, our monitoring, our SOCs, our big data platform, and then built our managed security offering and ran that for the past few years for Cisco for helping customers monitor their networks for security threats. And just a few months ago, I came over to help build a product that is for you, for our customers to threat hunt for themselves in their own environments. And that's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, been with Cisco since 2001 in the security space. Over the last few years, I've spent time building security operations centers. So lots of automation, lots of orchestration, trying to exploit the APIs instead of looking at the UI only. And Martin and I have been working together, developing a platform.
All right. So join WebEx Teams, join our room in WebEx Teams. And there's one reason why. We're going to have a special guest speaker toward the end of our talk today, and you're really going to want to be in the WebEx room so you can see some of the work he's going to do and get access to some of the tools he's going to give you. And I'll just put that out as a teaser. So let's begin with a scenario. So Nassif is my chief security officer. He's the chief security officer of this company, and I'm an analyst, and I work in the security operations center. And as he often does, he bursts into the room where we're all working with a demand. So, Nassif?
And the purpose of us doing this is a real-life encounter that we get all the time. I just came from a meeting, Martin. These folks are speaking about this new campaign, Mikey. They want to know if we are affected. That's all I have to give you at this time.
All right. So, you want some information on Mikey. How soon do I need to let you know?
I need to let them know within the next 4 hours if our organization is affected by Mikey. Right. We're a financial firm, and we work inside certain regulations, and we need to report this. We've got 4 hours to report if we are impacted.
All right, I'll get back to you.
Okay.
So usually what I'm going to do in the SOC is I'm going to look at my threat intelligence. What does it know about this threat? And I'm going to try to find out what does my threat intelligence tell me and what do my tools tell me. So in this case, here's what I'm able to do. So I'll go to Talos. What does Talos know about Mikey? I'll just search for that. I can see Talos has posted about this. Here's a blog on it. In the Talos blog, I can see there's a write-up here if I search for Mikey. All right, so Mikey is a Trojan, typical Windows Trojan. It's got some anti-analysis in it. Looks like it's got an interesting packing system. All right, so we know a little bit about, it's a Windows Trojan, right? So it's going to affect Windows machines. So now this is where I'm going to apply what I'm seeing here in my role in the Security Operations Center. I come down here and I can see indicators of compromise, which are just a way to know how do I see this activity on my network. And it's typically going to be IP addresses, domains, hashes, sometimes file paths, so we can see how do I know if this thing has shown up in my environment. So I'll look here and I see a few of these. There aren't any registry keys, but I see some file paths and there's a domain here and directories. So I'm just going to grab all this information. I'm just going to copy it to the clipboard. And I'm going to go to a workbench. I'm just going to paste it in. So when I paste it in, you can see I didn't bother formatting it. I didn't bother, having to slice and dice the data or desanitize. You guys have probably seen this where you take the brackets around the decimals in IP addresses just to prevent people from going to them and accidentally infecting themselves. That's typically how we share threat intel. So I just pasted it in, and what I got out of that was what's called a coverage map. So I can see on the coverage map that, all right, well, these hashes are red, which means they're bad, which is no surprise. I mean, they were already associated with the campaign. I can see, here is the IP that was put in. There was one IP in there. There was actually, here's another one, but that's local on my RFC 1918. And most importantly, I can see there is one target. So that tells me that I have one host inside my network that is interacting with this threat somehow. So I'm going to stop there and just say, Nassif, I did a little bit of research on Mikey. It's a Windows Trojan. I looked at what's going on with it. We have some indicators. It looks like I have one user who may be affected, but I'm going to have to investigate a little more fully.
Okay.
All right?
So at this point, you've been able to tell me within a few minutes, yes, we are impacted. You don't know the extent of the impact yet.
I need to dig a little
But you
further.
do see some type of trigger towards something you've searched for.
Exactly. I've got some of the IP addresses that I've seen are currently unknown. I don't know if they're malicious or not, so I'm going to have to dig a little further.
Okay.
All right? So that's a typical scenario in a SOC, and what someone is going to have to do is give a quick answer to their executive about what's going on with a threat. And it kind of highlights that the typical problem in a SOC, at least the ones I've run, are that we often get our chief security officer bursting into the room or some executive who needs an answer, and we have to start then looking at our tools to ask, have I seen this? When did I see it? How bad is it? Are these indicators that I'm hearing about, are they truly bad? Or what's their current disposition? Has it been in my environment? And I have to go through doing that, and I have to look in my SIM and on my endpoint system, and I have to look on my firewalls and my flow collectors and on to understand what's happened. And by the time I'm done with my investigation, I have 16 tabs open, and I've got a clipboard open, I'm copying and pasting data. And in some ways, Cisco has made the problem worse because we've invested $7 billion in our security portfolio, and we've purchased best-of-breed companies like SourceFire and StealthWatch and Duo and Observable Networks, and I'm not naming lots of others that we've bought over the past few years, and we've assembled this great portfolio, and probably most of you own some of those products. What we want to help you do is make those work together so that you can do threat investigations and make them effective. So here is our agenda for today. We've already covered the first two things, so we're partway done. But here's what we want to do. We want to go through some use cases with you today to show you how you would hunt for a threat using that Cisco security product, the ones that were on the title slide. And then we're also going to show you how to do it with threat response, and we're going to show you how to tie them together. All right? We'll tell you more about that in just a little bit. So let's start. And actually, before I go any further, Nassif, I see your...
Yeah, no, I just want to, number 8. Number 8 is where we take this from a 200 to probably 300, 400. We have a guest here that's going to show you how they've exploited our APIs that we've made available to deliver an outcome. So I think that's an exciting part.
So what we're going to do is, I have timers set so that at 12:30, we're going to make sure we reserve time for Christopher to show you some special tools that we're also going to allow you to follow along in the WebEx Teams room and get access to this code for yourself to use it in your own operations environments. So stick around, I think you're really going to like it. Let's start with our first use case. Typical use case, do I have any infected hosts in my environment? And it often starts with a question someone is asking. It could be an executive, it could be some news you've read. There's a threat. Am I affected by this threat? And what we're going to do as we walk through the steps of this investigation are listed here on the slide. In most investigations, what you're going to try to find out is, what do I know about this threat? In other words, how does it work and how would I find it if I could? Do I see it in my environment? Is it blocked already? And then if it's not blocked, there's further investigation to do. I need to tie some further things together to be able to take action. And this is where what I like to say with threat response is I'm looking for the gray and orange. I'm looking for things that are suspicious or unknown to take action on, and then just verify that things are blocked that should be blocked.
And what Martin is trying to say there, in terms of the SOC, malicious stuff that are already convicted, if you've got good policy set, that's probably well taken care of.
Yeah.
Clean stuff, well taken care of. It's where your security analysts are going to spend the time on that suspicious and the unknown to determine how suspicious and how impacted are we by this unknown, and should we be taking on this action? Are we patient zero for this unknown? So we'll spend a lot of time there trying to raise the fidelity of that unknown to determine the next action in the OODA loop, which may be the action part.
That's right, good. All right, the room is full enough that the front row is now being populated, so that's a good sign. All right, so just like we did a few moments ago, we will often start with threat intelligence. And I'm going to Talos because Talos is Cisco, so of course I'm going to go to Talos. But you can go wherever you want to find your threat intelligence. But the key here is I need indicators. In other words, I need something that I can look for in my network to know if I'm affected by this threat. Talos publishes, when it publishes a threat, it typically, not always, but it typically publishes what are called indicators of compromise. Now, I want to point something out. I'm going to explain some terms today that you maybe already know, but just humor me, and that way everybody is up to speed on what the terms mean. But we're going to look for indicators of compromise. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do with these indicators of compromise is we're going to go to AMP. Okay, AMP is our AMP for endpoints is an anti-malware product that we place on our endpoints. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look in AMP, and what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to take the data from the indicators of compromise, and I'm going to have to search them. I believe I'm going to have to search one at a time.
You're going to have to search one at a time. You cannot paste multiple indicators of compromise. So that's a time element. You have an IP address, you've got a file hash, one at a time. And the assumption in this scenario is that you do have AMP for endpoints deployed across environment. If you don't have AMP for endpoints deployed across your environment, you will not be able to get that report back, what did that host do?
Right.
So the assumption here is that you've got AMP for endpoints.
And I do want to be clear with the audience. We'll be talking about all the products today, and they don't depend on AMP, but they work great with AMP because you can see inside that endpoint and find out how it was affected. So this is what we did. We looked for that source IP, and sure enough, we find Homer Simpson, and his machine has been interacting with that IP. And we actually do see some files that are also interacting with it. And when we dig a little bit deeper, we can see some files that appear to be, we see that the file was detected. There was a quarantine failure at one point. And so we can see some interaction from one host in the environment with at least one of the indicators of compromise, as well as some file activity going on that endpoint. All right? So now, one thing we could do is use Cisco Threat Response to interact with AMP and see if we can speed this process up. The first thing we're going to have to do, though, is set it up. Now, this is going to be especially useful to you in your take-home slides. By the end of today's session, you will have the latest PDF generated because we were up late working on the content, making sure it was fresh for you. And so by the end of the session, grab the content from the server, and you'll have all these slides so you can use them to follow along when you do this at home. So the first thing we're going to do is go to AMP, and with AMP, you can grab your API credentials. Once you grab those credentials, you can then go back, you can create a new credential. You're going to want a read-write credential, and here's why. If you set it up for read-write, if you find an unknown hash, an unknown file, you can put it in a block list right from Threat Response. And so that way you can take effect in your environment. So set it up as read-write. Once you do that, then you can come back, you can take your client IP information, and don't even try to go into the PDF and move that black box out of the way and find my API credentials, because I was smart enough to put it in as a correct screenshot. But use your API credentials from here and paste them. Now go back to Cisco Threat Response, and you can simply add a module, add the actual client ID and API key, and you're good to go. It's all hooked up.
A point here is you can create both read-only and read-write. And that read-only credential is very valuable if you have an MSSP that's monitoring your environment for you. You can give them the read-only API, and they can look across things for you. As long as they've got the API, they can access your telemetry coming from AMP for endpoints. The read-write allows, like Martin said, for you to take that block action or the unblock action on AMP's simple custom detection list. One of the things that you will not be able to do through simple custom detection, for example, if you see lots of action from a known clean file such as command.exe, you will not be able to add a clean file onto the simple custom detection. You have to create an application block list for that. So that's the ability that we've done there. We also give you the ability to name that module anything that you want, and that module is tied into 3 geos: North America, APJC, as well as the European Union. So if you've got a global deployment, you can touch all 3 elements of your global deployment.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should have mentioned that. So yeah, hitting your geos and being able to put them in specifically in threat response there. So we did 2 things on those slides. We generated an API key from AMP, and then we pasted it into threat response so that it's hooked together. So now that that's done, you've connected them. Okay? So now let's also set up Umbrella. So if you've got Umbrella, and I'm going to let you talk through Umbrella. You want want the clicker?
Sure, yeah. So Umbrella is our recursive DNS service that you can either deploy the agents on the machines, or you can deploy virtual appliances on site. The benefit of the virtual appliances on site is to provide protection to those devices that cannot have an agent. Think of your thermostats, your building control units. If they have an IP address, you can provide them a layer of DNS protection. And the reason why that's important is if you have malware on those elements and they attempt to reach out to the command and control server via DNS, if we can just block it because we know they are known bad, it quietens down any subsequent actions that may come from that. Okay, so the thing with Umbrella is we've got one module that we've given to you that can take 3 Umbrella APIs. And the Umbrella APIs perform very specific functions. As long as you have insights at least and platform, you will be able to get the reporting API. And the reporting API is going to allow you, as cybersecurity analysts, investigators, to ask the question, which entities under the protection of my Umbrella deployment has gone to this known bad domain? So if a piece of intelligence comes out, you've got the domain, you can ask that directly, and you'll see the relations. The second API is the enforcement API. And the enforcement API comes through the platform's license, not through Insight. What the enforcement API allows you to do is add domains programmatically via an API onto that list. If you reference that list in your policy, you will receive that protection. Same caveat shows up here as showed up on AMP with clean, well-known domains. You cannot put a clean, well-known domain programmatically via an API onto that list. And you'll see this as you operate that. And then the final one is Umbrella has their own source of threat intelligence called Investigate. And when you integrate the Investigate API, which is available through certain packages or as standalone, you are able to use Umbrella's threat intelligence to provide the disposition for IPs and domains. Why that's important is, as Martin will explain in subsequent slides, is that the disposition is used to make a judgment, and a judgment is used to derive a verdict. Multiple verdicts aggregated derives a final verdict as to what we think should be. So everything is based on the context of time, and we'll show you that as Martin goes through that. But that's essentially what you're going to be able to do. From a single dashboard, if you've added these 2 modules, you will be able to use Umbrella, you'll be able to use AMP to figure out who has gone to IPs or domains in your environment. I'll walk through this setup here. First thing is, on the reporting API, this is going to be inside the Umbrella console. It was released in about November. You'll go onto admin and you'll create a reporting API key. There can only be 1 reporting API key per deployment. So if you lose this key and you've got 10 systems that have already done and you need to add an 11th system, guess what you're going to do? You're going to generate a new key and you're going to touch all 11 systems again. So treat this key with care if you don't want to go visit systems, again, that is using this. And we query two endpoints here. We query the top identities endpoint, and we query actually the sightings endpoint of who has gone there and who's the top identity that has gone there. So there's two endpoints that come with the reporting API, and that is simply going to Umbrella. It's your license. We are just allowing you to access it as in your investigation workbench. I think I covered all those things, the investigate, reporting, and the packages that they're in.
Yeah, my favorite is, this slide here, which shows kind of how these are useful in threat response.
So what we're showing on this slide is that we are giving you a relations graph. And as you've added your modules into it, the relations graph is going to show you what parts of your system has highlighted that. So the fact that we targeted that as a suspicious IP, if we have got the investigate API, we've used that verdict to derive the fact that that's suspicious. We'll use Talos Intelligence, we'll use AMP Global Intel, so on and so forth. If we needed to execute a block on that domain, instead of the SOC having to go visit Umbrella dashboard, going to the policy, going to the list, they can issue a block directly through the programmatic enforcement API. And then if you wanted to get a domain view, you can pivot directly to the investigate user interface to figure out, tell me more about that particular domain. So all those things are represented there. Sightings, you can see there, the reporting API. Anytime we have seen something, we will try to let you know, this is the time we've seen it, this is your data that we're representing on a sightings timeline for you, and we're also bringing the intelligence. In this case, you can see that we use the Umbrella Investigate API to determine that that domain has got a poor reputation, it's malicious, and we put the time on that. This data is good for the next month, because that domain could change its disposition. So, how to add it? Everything inside threat response is based on this concept of modules. So, as you log in, you'll go add the new integration module, and those are the keys that you'll use. This will all be takeaways for you. By the time you leave here, you should be able to configure your own modules and get things going. Let me see if there's anything else here. Tokens will be created on Investigate API. Again, if you don't have Investigate API license, you will not be able to create Investigate API tokens. But that's where those are created, and the Enforcement API. Name it whatever you want to, create it, integrations, that's the Enforcement API. All this is as takeaway for you so that you can actually go and do the investigation. All yours, Martin.
All right. So just as you said, the steps that you just saw, don't need to write them down. They're in a PDF that you can get as part of your session, and that'll help you do all the needful to hook this up when you get back home. But what we've just done is we've set up AMP and Umbrella and connected it with threat response. So let's take the same investigation and we'll conduct it with threat response. So a few slides ago, I went to Talos, went to the blog, looked at the threat indicators associated with the threat I was interested in researching, pasted them in, and when I did, I got my relations graph at the bottom, I got my sightings over on the right, and the modules will show me what it knows about it. All right? I can then look and see any targets. A target is just a device within my network that has seen or has encountered that threat in some way.
Yeah, so let me explain this to you, what you're seeing right now. Right now, what you're seeing is we've lit up both an endpoint target and a network target. That first one called Workstation 1 with that particular IP address, that comes from the Umbrella Reporting API. The reason why we know the name is we have been able to plan our deployment, that these workstations, these subnets, that's where they live, and you pull that information back. If that was an endpoint host name, you would get that information back too. The second one there, that comes from AMP for endpoints. So AMP for endpoints knows the MAC address, It knows the operating system, it knows the service pack applied to it, and it's got a computer GUID. All we've done here is we've pulled the information back from your deployment into a central place so you can look at the big picture much faster.
And I suppose I mentioned earlier that what the relations graph is showing you is a target that has interacted with one of these threats. But the fact is it wouldn't have to be a threat, right? It's just an observable. So if you just want to know, did this target go to this domain, even if it wasn't malicious, you would still be able to see that.
Yes, I'll tell you one of the use cases that one of our customers have used. Their policy says, thou shalt no longer use 4.2.2 and 8.8 as DNS servers. They also have AMP4 endpoints deployed everywhere. They run a search, 4.2.2, 8.8.8. They get the list of machines that are still talking out to those DNS servers. Hey, fix these guys. It's still a problem. They also then take a snapshot. They go back on a monthly basis to see the compliance, if anything has changed.
Yep, good. So we tracked it then to internal targets. We can then look around the relations graph and see if any of those results we can see the relations graph and drill in there, right? We just mentioned that earlier.
So let me speak about this slide for a few seconds here. The slide looks busy, but of most importance on this slide is the fact of these blue magnifying glass. On the domain, the blue magnifying glass. Anything that shows up on the relations graph with a blue magnifying glass is something that you have searched for. That is the analogous to the Google question you've asked. Everything that comes back on that graph that does not have a blue magnifying icon against it is information that your systems told us about what you've searched for. So as I read this graph right now, if you can highlight the unknown SHA-256, what I'm reading right now is that I've got an unknown file that has indeed connected to a suspicious IP, 52.1.22.171, and I've got another file, two files, the B0CC, that has done the same thing. This is information I did not have a few seconds ago. I have this information at my fingertips right now. Remember we spoke about that gray area for security? You can now start acting on that. We know that out of the threat intelligence that we've got configured, and the threat intelligence sources that we support, again, Talos Intelligence, AMP Global Intelligence, VirusTotal, if you've got your own VirusTotal API keys, you can bring your VirusTotal API key to this platform, and then finally, Umbrella Investigate. So out of all our threat intelligence, none of them can raise that fidelity of that SHA beyond unknown. So you, as an investigator, you can act on that right now to get immediate context.
Yep. So for each of these devices, then you can drill in and pivot down to get more information. So we can look at that suspicious IP. We can then pivot into other products. So you can see here, I can pivot into Talos, right over into AMP or ThreatGrid, and see what they know about it. All right, we can pull up more information. The observables pane will tell you in a format the disposition, or what we're going to talk about shortly, the verdict on each of those observables. All right. And then you can drill into each of those observables and see sightings and judgments, which we'll talk about in just a moment. When you select the endpoint, you can actually investigate it. You can, if you add that, and just as you said earlier, remember when we saw that gray file, that hash? If we add that to our investigation, that's how we can then look and see what else has this been doing. And we can do that here. We can add anything to our investigation and go deeper. All right, and then we can look at those files just as we did there. There's that gray file.
Yeah, so let me take a pause there. Just go back one slide. That particular file, it's gray, but you may not want to block it yet. This add SHA-256 to customs detection, because you've got the read-write API capability, you very well could decide to block that at this moment in time. But you probably want some more context. By adding anything inside the relations graph to the current investigation, you're going to open the aperture to try and support the evidence as to why you're about to do this action. So the next slide that Martin's going to show is what renders after he has clicked that. So now notice there's a blue magnifying glass around that file hash. You've added to the investigation. It is now something you have searched for. And look at the surrounding data that has come back. In addition to that file opening some to unknown, we've also found that that file has opened to a suspicious and a malicious IP, 101. At that stage, you probably have good enough evidence to execute the block. Any questions? The element here that, yes, please.
What is the timeline?
So the timeline, how far we go back is when we make this query, we go back and ask, we keep that open for 60 seconds as to how much data can come back from AMP4 endpoints.
Yeah, but I mean, this kind of environment can be very hard to understand, to describe if the movements are very slow. I mean, hours, days, or weeks.
Yes. So I'm glad you asked that. In the sightings of the... I'll repeat the question. Oh, he wants you to ask the question. Okay.
My question is related to timeline and how to understand the behavior of these connections
Yes.
in a long period of time.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of movements around all the connections, all the devices, and it's very hard to understand from two axes.
Sure.
It's more deep, in my opinion.
Sure. So we provide the time in the observables pane. We actually have a timeline there that will tell you when that connection was opened for the first time, when it was last seen. So we're providing that reference, but we do not provide you the context of time on the graph. The graph is the relations, but if you want to dig deep into that relation, you just go into the observable pane, and in the sightings column, you'll see all the reports that your API has reported back, the timestamps of when things have happened.
And we'll get to that here in just a few slides to show that timeline. Okay? So a few features to know about. You can actually save a snapshot. And this actually does speak to your question a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
A snapshot. So being able to say, as of right now, here is what I know about these observables. These are malicious, these are suspicious, these are unknown. I can then go back to that snapshot a day, a week, a month later and see at that point in time what was known about it. So I can save that snapshot. Okay? I can also save it in a casebook, so I can share this not just for myself, but with my team. And this casebook follows me to AMP. It follows me through ThreatGrid. It follows me to Cisco Threat Response. It will follow me in other Cisco security products, and it follows everyone on my team, so I can share information.
Okay.
As we talked about adding to casebook, so I can take any of these observables and add them to that casebook. All right? And then I can actually pivot into an investigation from casebook. We talked a little bit about blocking threats, right? So we can add things to a blacklist. Hey, Ed. And if I've got the umbrella enforcement API, right, I can block domains right there.
That's correct.
So we've successfully done an investigation with AMP. We've connected Cisco Threat Response with AMP. We've connected it with Umbrella. And we've done a threat investigation with Cisco Threat Response. So now let's kind of back up for a moment and talk about threat response and what we're really aiming at here. Threat response as a product, we have about 3,000 customers, 3,000 organizations using it today. They're finding this useful to tie their products together and do threat investigations. And we did this so that it could be used in a security operations center. We call it your investigations workbench. All right? It's your way of bringing tools together to conduct investigations and save you time. And here's the best part. The box you see all the way to the right, no cost. If you own AMP, you can log in and use this right now. If you own ThreatGrid, you can log in and use this right now with that login. If you own email security or Umbrella, you have the right to use this. And you can have an account and you can use it for free, no extra charge. This product is designed to help you get the most out of your Cisco security portfolio and tie things together. And you're going to continue to see windows and pivot menus in each of those products that make it easy for you to tie it all back together.
Yeah, so as a Cisco security customer, you are entitled to an instance of threat response. That's the bottom line. If you don't have an instance of threat response, just let your account teams know. We'll let Martin know. He'll share his details after this. We will provision an instance for you. The nice thing about this is we're always adding. The latest one that we've added now is the ability to be able to search through email. Could you imagine being able to figure out where did this file come from? Did it actually come through email? That comes through threat response. So this is a good segue into this particular slide here. There's 3 ways that you really operate threat response. Through the UI is the first one. You take a source of intelligence, think of this as, I've got a question that I want to answer, paste it into threat response, get back, using yourself as the search engine repository. Okay? We're going to use the threat intelligence that you've got configured. We're going to use all your APIs to try and answer the question that you have posed. That's the first way. That's through the UI. The second way is what's becoming very popular, is by having a browser plugin for threat response. And what that browser plugin allows you to do now is, whenever you're working inside Cisco, anything inside the Chrome browser today, Firefox is in beta, anything you're working inside Chrome, be it Splunk, be it another SIM tool, as long as we can pull those observables out of there, domains, IPs, file hashes, you can use your threat intelligence in real time to get the disposition of the needles in the needle stack. So you may be looking at tons of IPs coming through your Splunk logs. How do you know what to focus on first? Well, with the browser plugin, you can look at that immediately. It will scan the page for all the observables, pull out the observables, and then in that same step, provide you the disposition of what you're looking at. Unknowns, malicious, anything else in there that you want to pivot to, you can go to that immediately with a single click. So that's becoming very, very popular as we see folks now just treating it as portable threat response. Because the nice thing about the browser plugin, it also allows you to have a response action if you send up the API. So what does that mean? If you wanted to block the domain directly from the browser plugin, you can block the domain, block the file hash, unblock, without having to go the first route into the threat response UI.
And Nassif, we're going to demo that here in just a little bit.
We'll
show it on our slides, yep.
And the third one is something we'll release towards February 15th, February 14th. It will be the ability for your next generation firewalls running FTD 6.3 or higher. It's got the ability to publish IPS alerts over syslog. By the ability to do that, we will take those alerts, ingest them in the Cisco Security Services Exchange up in the cloud. You will decide if you want to send those alerts to the cloud. It will curate that. All your alerts will come in there. It will be deduplicated and obey your rules, ignore these subnets, ignore this IP, or raise the fidelity on these subnets, on those IPs. And when it's notable, it will be published as an incident to threat response. So what does this mean to you? For your investigators, it means that that IPS alert, you can use your portfolio, threat grid, AMP for endpoints, umbrella, SMA, to figure out what's the next step I need to take with this IPS alert. That will come mid-February in beta. I think we've spoken about that. The observables. Observables are also akin to indicators of compromise. But we use the term observables because they are tangible. They show up in logs. We can run a file hashing against them, and we can see that this is exactly what we're seeing on the wire, on the disk, anything like that. Those observables we support today are file hashes, SHA-256, IP addresses, URLs, domains. There's a whole bunch of things that we'll cover in there, email address, email subjects, things like that. Those are all supported. And at the end of the day, we've given you an investigation workbench that within a few minutes, you don't have to spend a lot of hours to perform custom integration. We have done the work in the background to link the pieces together. You have to just bring the API keys to make it happen.
All right. So let's get on the same page with what we call things. And we're going to start by using the Cisco Threat Intelligence model, which is, it's a bit like STIX, right? A bit of a derivation.
Yeah, we actually have a special guest in the room here, Craig Bruzewski also, who's, would you say the architect of Threat Response? Yeah.
Head honcho.
So we started building this data model before STIX 2.0 was actually even sent as a proposal through their formal process. It largely reflects that. There are deviations. We did some simplifications. STIX 2.0 is a pretty awesome simplification of STIX 1.2. We took it a little bit further because of our deployment requirements, and basically it's really a data store, distributed graph, and operational data model versus a data exchange model. But we don't need to get into any more of that. Yeah, so that's pretty much the origin of this data model. The data model itself is open source. The API for implementing it, basically it's an Elasticsearch-backed API with RESTful and GraphQL interfaces. That's also open source. So if you just go to github.com, threatgrid/CTIA or /CTIM, you can go grab all the source code, go grab all the documentation, reference docs for everything, and that's it.
Awesome.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg. So let's walk through these quickly. So modules. What we call a module is how we connect to one of the security products that we're talking about today. So Umbrella, AMP, ThreatGrid, email, and well, actually email would be considered a device, but this is the way we talk to each one of those. Observables. I have gotten in trouble, and I've been chastened before, for calling everything an indicator. Okay, not everything is an indicator. An indicator means it's indicating something malicious, something you should look for because it's bad. An observable is just something you want to know about, okay? It is something to search for, and it comes in many forms. You can see them there, and the interface will guide you through looking for these, IPs, hashes, domains, etc.
A note on the observables. Go back one slide.
Yep.
So you can see there observables such as MAC address. Threat Response supports it. It doesn't mean that the APIs that you're going to query is going to come back to support it.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. So for example, we may be looking for MAC addresses because network ops have contacted us. And we'll say, you know what? I see the MAC address inside my M4 endpoints. I see it right there. Let me paste the MAC address in and see if I can catch it. The nice thing is, we can paste it. M4 endpoints will not return the API on the MAC address for us by using MAC address as the source. So we still got to jump through some hoops. But what we do is we iterate. We go back to M4 endpoints API. Please prioritize the ability to search for MAC address so we can accelerate that linkage between NetOps and SecOps.
And you know, that's a good point. I don't think we explained this at the beginning, and I want to say it now. We're part of the product team, and you do have our lead engineer, our lead developer right here with you. So if you have feedback, if you have things you want or you question, we want to hear that. The WebEx Teams room will be the best way to do it, but we want to hear it. We'll talk to you after the session, et cetera. We want to hear your feedback and your thoughts. We will make sure that the product goes in the direction that serves your interests. The UI itself is clean. It's meant to be a white space to allow you to get started right away without a lot of guidance. Judgments are important. I want to make sure you understand what a judgment is. So when we see an indicator at a point in time, judgments are about time. Just to refer back to the question from earlier, judgments are about time. At a point in time, the judgment from threat intelligence was that this observable is good, bad, unknown, whatever it is. That point in time, it is made, and then it has a duration. So a good example is a file. When a file is judged to be malicious, it will probably never change because it's, you know, the hash has been taken, the file is a snapshot of that file at a point in time. An IP address, on the other hand, I think it has been said that if you were to block all of the IPs that are called malicious and block every one of them that you receive from threat intelligence, within a few months, you would block all routable IPv4 space. So essentially, IP addresses do change. They go from malicious to unknown to good, and it's important to know that the timeline, the judgment on that is a relevant part of it. And that actually feeds into what is called a verdict. That is the disposition of that observable at that point in time.
And the verdict has an order of precedence.
Yes.
If one source is saying something is clean and another source or 3 other sources is saying something is malicious, clean is going to trump malicious. So on and so forth down the list.
And I think back a few slides, that rubric was laid out for you so that you could check it if you want, but it is in the slides, in the notes.
Any thoughts on the precedence order? The reason why I asked if there's any thoughts, because please contact us in the WebEx rooms or offline. We hear other customers maybe wanting to move common and unknown. We maybe want unknown to override common, things like that. So it's always a discussion that we'll have with our engineering teams as to how our data model should be functioning. Also, to note, there can be multiple verdicts reported. When there are multiple verdicts that are being reported for a given observable, threat response will compute the verdict based on the multiple verdicts. And the next slide is going to show you where we reflect the threat response verdict. Okay? So the threat response verdict is going to be reflected right under the name of the observable. So that's always going to be known as the final verdict. The final verdict is going to show up there. Okay? And you might see some differentiation between final and multiple verdicts, how we got there. Go ahead.
So this is where I get these mixed up sometimes. An indicator is really a pattern of activity, a pattern of knowing something is bad, it is malicious. It's represented by the fingerprint in threat response, and it's typically associated with campaigns, malware campaigns that are specific to those threats.
Yeah, we add this on here for you so that you can understand what ThreatBird, what the research efficacy teams have found out during their malware research, that this pattern is linked to this campaign. And we put that out there as an indicator.
And you've already seen targets. Targets are something within your environment that has interacted with that observable.
Today, we've got a few targets that are supported. Endpoints. If we see anything on the endpoint that lights up, it will show up as a target. If we see anything pass through an email security appliance, an ESA, be it on-prem, be it in the cloud, we call that target a process email service. The third target we have is network target. Anything that came from Umbrella. Any site income from Umbrella, that is a network-based target. Email addresses is an email address target to let you know which users or which mailboxes inside the organization were targeted with this particular campaign. And then the final target is a network access gateway target or network target. That's your FMCs. If anything has passed through your firepower devices, any hash, and the firepower has seen it, and firepower is linked to AMP, that's going to show up as a network element inside target. So there's a few different kinds of targets. And the latest iteration of threat response, we do a continuous release cycle. So every 2 weeks, we will push out a new version. This is a cloud-based system, so we can do that cloud delivery model. The latest model, I think we're at 115, will give you those summaries of what we found out. So if you see 100 targets, it will give you 50 endpoints, 4 processes, things like that.
All right, just as we mentioned earlier, you can also create a snapshot, which is useful to know at this point in time, here's what I knew about this, here are the targets that were interacting with it, here are the judgments that have been seen. So a snapshot is critical for you to be able to use over a point in time?
Yeah, what snapshots are used often for is actually in those cases. Let's say you're using remedy tickets or ServiceNow ticketing. If you need your analyst to provide the evidence as to maybe an escalation point from level 1 to level 2, tell me why you're asking for this IP to be blocked. Tell me why you're asking for this hash to be blocked. You use the snapshot as that evidence at that moment in time. Today, I asked for this. It's not uncommon with IPs to change its disposition over time. So you could come back 3 months and run that same investigation, and what used to be suspicious could be now unknown, because those judgments, their time have expired on those judgments. They are now unknown.
Then, of course, you can save your work in a casebook. So again, the casebook allows you to have a lightweight ability to save information about what you know about this, share it with your team, share it across all your products as well. So it follows you everywhere, and you'll see it as a little blue icon at the bottom right of your screen in each of these tools. So let's get back to threat hunting. Yes, Craig?
Microphone?
Either way, I would point out that what you're saving here are just the names of the observables and the values. Everything you see in that casebook will be continually updated, as opposed to a snapshot, right? A snapshot is basically the saved state of an investigation at the time it was done. So it's what you see there, like in terms of dispositions and verdicts, will always reflect the current, like when you know the current time or the current notion or disposition of that verdict, right? So that changes in time.
Okay.
All right. So let's get into another investigation. So in this case, we want to investigate a phishing attack that is delivering malware. All right? So when we're conducting this, here's the way we're going to begin the scenario. And this is actually pretty common. I am an email security administrator. I've received a message in my inbox. There's a retrospective verdict that has been found on something that has passed through my mail server. Now, retrospective verdicts are important because, especially with file malware, the first time it's seen, it may not be known as malicious. And when it is unknown, your email security appliance with AMP will send it for sandboxing in ThreatGrid and find out, is it malicious? If it finds out it is malicious, it will then convict it, and then we know that it's something that needs to be stopped from hence. So we've begun our investigation with a retrospective alert. Something has come through my mail server that is malicious.
Yeah, let me just add some context onto that. So the AMP cloud performs continuous monitoring of all its hashes. Just because we let something through now doesn't mean we're going to forget about it. So we let it in, and your policy may say, okay, hold it for about an hour, but after an hour, just let it through. Right? Unknown, depending on what your email policy is. Just because you let it in or because we let it go through that threshold doesn't mean we are going to ignore it. The AMP cloud is continuously monitoring. When that file hash, that same hash changes disposition, you will get these alerts coming through. So your email admins are probably chasing these down all the time to figure out, did someone actually click on this? Because if they did, I need to open another case to let them know we let something through beyond. So that's the important thing. It's always being continuously monitored.
So what we're going to do, we receive the alert. We're going to see who received that file. Okay, we're going to verify that it got blocked or that it is being blocked now. We're going to see if anyone executed it, and then we're going to see if there's any further activity from there. That's the way we're going to run that's sort of our playbook for this investigation.
And what Martin's going to show you here is he's going to show you how to do it with the individual products. And he wraps it up with showing how you take all this information that you would have done individually and put it inside the threat response investigation workbench to give you that element of speed and context of the relations graph.
Yep. So we're going to begin on our SMA. So the Security Management Appliance, the SMA, allows you to manage your ESAs with an email license. Okay, so we're going to go to the SMA, and on the SMA, we'll conduct a search for that hash that just showed up in our retrospective email alert. And sure enough, we do see that it came through, and I can see that there are a number of message IDs associated with that, all right? So I can now look into logs on the SMA, and as I do, I can see who received it. So there's Ravi, Michael, Elaine, Javed, and H. Simpson have received the file. So all 5 of them had the file sent to them. Now, when I go back into the SMA, I can look and see, I won't highlight it yet, but in here I can see that it recognized the file as unknown. It sent it to the AMP cloud to find out, actually it got an answer back from the AMP cloud that it was unknown.
So
right?
it actually sent it back, so it sent it up to ThreatGrid. Because you linked your ESA with ThreatGrid, When something came through unknown and your policy says, submit unknown files to ThreatGrid to get the disposition to figure out what's going on here, within 12 minutes, you got the response back. But the second log there, the 33447, the end of that message says, recommend to submit to ThreatGrid for file analysis. The response on that message is file analysis complete within 12 minutes. So we knew within 12 minutes, we got a disposition for what was unknown. That's the source of the retrospective alert.
So we can actually go and look and see in ThreatGrid that that file was sent to ThreatGrid for analysis. The ESA sent it. See, it was submitted by the ESA device. And we can see that it had a threat score of 95.
So on this one, most customers don't know this, but I will stress it here in case you're in the same group. When you set up your ESAs, by default, they're going into just the general ThreatGrid instance for analysis. You won't be able to track how many submissions your ESAs have done. So when you do this and you link it up and you've got ThreatGrid, you ask, link my FMC, my firepower, my NGFWs, link my ESAs, link all these APIs to the same ThreatGrid account. That way, you've got coverage for everything that your devices have submitted.
So then we can go back to AMP and see, okay, I know that the file was sent. It looks like it actually got through and was sent to some users and arrived in their inboxes. Did anyone open the file and actually attempt to execute it? And here we see that in AMP, H. Simpson, our perennial victim, did open the file. So we see that the file did reach H. Simpson, and he opened the file.
Likewise, if you go back there, Martin, we've tied in our ESA to AMP. Anything that comes from AMP, verdicts and things like that with our licensing, we want to know. So again, you have a central console to tie in AMP, to tie in FMC, as well as ThreatGrid side, tie in AMP, tie in FMC, tie in Umbrella, tie in ESA. What we're seeing here is that we saw it come through an email security appliance. In addition to coming through an email security appliance, we actually see the file on a Windows 7 machine. So that tells us one of our users actually downloaded the file. The best thing to see here is come through the email security appliance and no other machines. That means you've given good education or something like that. But when we see this, we know, okay, at this stage we need to take further action.
We can then, from there, we could pivot from AMP directly over into threat response, right, and look further from there. Now, let's take this same investigation. We've done it on the SMA. We've done it in AMP and ThreatGrid. Let's see what we can do in threat response to speed this process up. To do that, first we're going to set it up, right? And with email integration, there are a number of things you can search for. And this is important, right? You may know that there's a phishing campaign that involves a specific subject line, or it comes from a specific user or a specific MTA. You can search for those things directly in threat response when you hook these together, and you can do it easily, right?
Yeah.
Now, we could go through here and show the setup of how to connect SMA with threat response, but when I look at the time, I see, well, maybe it would be better to skip past these slides and move directly into the investigation, and what do you think?
I think I want to take just maybe 2 minutes to explain how this integration works. The SMA integration, the email security module integration with threat response works via something called the Cisco Services Exchange. And the Cisco Service Exchange is that proxy layer. Threat response lives in the cloud. Your security management appliances live on-prem, or they could live inside Cisco's hosted cloud for you. How do we allow threat response to use your deployment as a source of enrichment during the course of investigation? So there's two things we do. We firstly allow you to establish a proxy, and then we ask you, do you want to allow threat response to access your proxy? So it's 2 steps. So with the SMA 12.0 code that just FCS'd in November, we have threat response integration through this thing called the Cisco Services Exchange. And what that is You set up a token and you say, I want to register this SMA, which lives on-premise, with the Services Exchange. No threat response involved yet. When you do that, you also have to tell the Service Exchange, I want to allow my threat response instance to be able to access my Service Exchange. So the path of query is going to be this way. From threat response to the Service Exchange to your on-prem. We don't go directly from the threat response cloud to your on-prem device. Everything is done through the Service Exchange, but you have to authorize that.
So I think the way we talked about it yesterday, if you're an on-prem appliance and you're safely ensconced behind the walls of that building, and I am a cloud product, this is the way we meet, right? We designate a place to meet, and SSE is where we meet.
That's right. Okay, so that's the only thing, and this is new. The SMA is the first platform with threat response to expose the Service Exchange to customers to allow them to do this. To be able to integrate the next generation firewall IPS alerts, you will perform the same. It will come through the Service Exchange. Okay.
So I think it would be good. So in your guides, yes, please. Good, thanks for saying that. So if you will look here, on the SMA, you'll need to upgrade to Async OS 12.0, okay? Which is available, I believe GA is next month, right?
Yeah. Okay. GA for on-premise will go next month. CES, the Cisco email security hosted in the cloud, they normally lag by a few weeks. So you can probably expect that to be start of March when CES will be at 12.0. But once you've got the 12.0 code, inside the 12.0 code on the SMA, there's something called an SSE connector, which is what this references, allows you to get to the Exchange.
So what I'd like you to do, if you have the email security appliance with SMA, if you're ready and willing to upgrade to SMA, to Async OS 12.0, this guide, this PDF is in your content from this session, and it will give you terrific screenshots. And I'm going to just go through them and let you see how you're going to hook this up. You're going to go between threat response and email security appliance, and your SMA, and you're going to connect them through SSE. Okay, you're going to have specific exactly what to do to set all of this up. And you'll copy the token over, and once you do, you'll navigate in, click register, you'll see that it's registered, you'll see it in your devices, okay? Then you'll add the module into threat response, and you're done. So that is an exercise for the reader, a terrific thing for you to have in your PDF that'll allow you to set all of this up at home.
Yeah.
Now let's come back now to our investigation and just look at how we would do the same investigation using threat response.
Coming.
Let's repeat the question, though.
The question is, if you don't have SMA, can you just use the ESA integrate with threat response? Unfortunately, not yet. Coming later this year, we hope. Not a committed roadmap, so I can't tell you yes for sure. But 80% of our customers that have ESAs deploy more than one as a high availability pair, at least, as a cluster. So that's why we went the SMA route first. But good question.
The APIs are the same on the ESA and the SMA, so it's mostly just the issue of synchronizing some releases on the ESA side. It's likely to happen.
So I think what Craig is reminding us is that the coding work of this is something that's tenable to do in the future. But for now, it does require an SMA with Async OS 12.0 for you to use this feature. But it's free. So let's go back now and remember, I'm the email security administrator. I've received an email indicating that a retrospective alert has fired, meaning a file went through my system that wasn't known malicious at the time. It is now known to be malicious. I'm going to take the raw message, or I'm going to take that actual email that I received and just paste it in to threat response. Now that I've hooked them together, I can just paste it in.
Yeah, at this point, you've hooked AMP, you've hooked Umbrella, and you've hooked email.
Yep.
Into a single investigation platform.
Yep. So now I can analyze the outbreak. And when I do, I can see that 5 recipients did receive the email. Now notice, here are the 5. Okay, 5 people received it. I can see that there was 1 endpoint encounter. Okay, I get that from AMP. And if I look at my targets, I can see again, 5 email recipients. The ESA saw it too, so it's going to show up as a target and an endpoint. Okay?
And in a nice manner, we're also giving you the details around that email. You're able to see the email subject, you're able to see the email sender that sent it in, and you're getting to see the sending host IP that sent that email. So if you want to do investigation at that point, for example, email subject that is maybe something that's misspelled, USPS, FedEx, inboxes, whatever that may be, that can now become observable for you. Tell me any emails or any users that have been targeted with the subject, something that's been misspelled, things like that. So you're able to paint a very rapid picture as to the extent, is it a widespread email campaign, or is it very specific? And if it's very specific, can you detect a pattern out of that? HR, procurement, executives, very fast. Analysts could never do this before.
Yep. So we can zoom in, we can actually see who received the file, okay, the email recipients, and we can see one user who encountered the file on their endpoint. And again, it's our perennial Homer Simpson. We can see that he's encountered the file on his endpoint. We can pivot into AMP and actually look at the trajectory of that file and see if it executed and what it did, and we can see that it did. Here, we see that the file did execute, right? We can actually pivot to the target for more options. We can look and add this to the investigation and drill in deeper with it, okay? And as we drill deeper and we add that to the investigation, what we find in this investigation is that endpoint, that user, actually did talk to a malicious IP, and that there are 2 further unknown files that need to be investigated that we can actually, at this point, add to our block list in AMP to prevent any further infection. We can then invoke our incident response procedure on the Homer Simpson device in order to find out if it spread any further.
So just to recap, what Martin started off here was a retrospective alert. What he ended up with a few minutes later is 2 unknown files at rapid speed, because we were just calling upon all our APIs in a central investigation workbench.
So we can confirm 5 users received it, 1 user opened it, that user device shows further sign of compromise. We can block the malicious files in AMP, and then we can do an IR procedure on that laptop. What we often do at Cisco in our CCERT is we wipe and reload those machines. Okay, we don't typically do an in-depth investigation on every virus that gets on a machine. We're going to wipe and reload that machine. So this one, I'm sorry, this didn't get moved. This is bonus content. If you want to do another phishing investigation without a malicious file, but actually with a credential theft type of phish, I wanted to put this in the bonus content, but it got moved back up. I'm sorry for that. All right, so let's go on to another use case where you might have a compromised server. And in this case, we have the server Valley, and we have some indication that it's been compromised.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how many of you work inside regulated environments. In the United States, an FDA medical device can only have this image on it. Once it's got its certification to be a medical device, you cannot put any other additional software on it. So this is a real-world case on an FDA device that cannot take AMP4 endpoints, because that was not part of its certification process. So Martin's going to show you that investigation as to how you use threat response to start off with something that doesn't have AMP4 endpoints on it, and next actions.
So what we're going to do is we're going to look through the firewall logs. We're going to see what kind of activity has this server been doing lately. Where has it been going? We're going to see if we can find any command and control traffic, which would indicate that that server is under remote control from the outside right now. And if we do, we're going to block it. Okay, we need to block that traffic to quarantine, to kind of protect our environment, all right? Then, if we can, in a lot of ransomware we can't, but if we can, we're going to log into that server and try to figure out what's generating that traffic. Now, if we have AMP, we could do that. Automatically, it would see it. But in this case, we're going to have to log in and pull the file and send it to ThreatGrid ourselves. Once we know if it is malicious, then we'll have to invoke an IR procedure. All right? It may be innocuous, but it's probably malicious. So we'll log into the firewall. When we do, I'm going to go to connection events. All right, now I'm just going to look at everything that this Valley server, that's the IP that I put on that first orange slide. I'm going to look at what everything that Valley server is talking to right now. And I'm going to kind of look for things on the outside that it's talking to just to see if I can zoom in on it. Now, Nas, if you were saying yesterday, you go to look at intelligence events, right? That would be great.
Intelligence events is Cisco's Talos intelligence that have been downloaded to your NGFWs that are known bad command and control stuff. Those IPs are blocked. So kind of can relax with that, and you can do investigation otherwise. In this case, we may have a C2 heartbeat that we're trying to pick up.
Yep.
Don't show up in security intelligence events because that would have been blocked. So they're trying to stay under the radar with a known C2 pattern heartbeat, and so they may use AWS because they can, or they compromise something inside AWS. No one's going to block Amazon.com. So again, these are the things that we're looking for. Can we determine a heartbeat pattern on a regular cadence to see maybe this is the command and control server we're looking for?
Now we're doing this on the firewall. We could do this with a flow collector as well. If you have NetFlow deployed and you have a flow collector, that'd be another way to do it with StealthWatch, but I didn't put StealthWatch in the title, so we're going to use the NGFW, all right? So when I notice that some of these IP addresses are external, and I'm going to zoom in on one of them, and I just picked one to zoom in on for today's session, right? And you can see that IP address there, 22.23.63.114. And what I see when I look at the traffic is I see activity about every 30 seconds from Valley server to this external IP, pretty common indication of command and control traffic, all right? So from here, I could then look up in Talos, what does Talos know about that external IP, and see if it has a malicious indicator. And when I do that, I notice that the reputation of that IP address is neutral, meaning it's not known, so it's really not being blocked right now. So this is where it starts, your heart starts to race, because you realize you may have a compromised server that is actually a more focused attack, because the attacker was smart enough to leave his IP from a malicious blacklist. So now we're going to log into that server. And when we do, we could use TCP view, which is probably the easiest way to do this. But I decided to try to use native tools, and I'm using netstat here. So netstat-o will tell you, and you have to keep doing it until you find the connection happening. But if you do this, you can actually see the connection originating from the Valley server to that external IP address. And I've bracketed it in red there. My source port is 8789, and it's trying to talk to that, okay? Now, actually, I think that's the destination port, 8789, right. So it's trying to hit that server. Now, from there, if I use this task list command that you see down here, I can actually look up the PID, the process ID on this server, to figure out what file, what binary is generating that traffic. Now, I want to point out to you that we're using a tool called Packet Sender that I decided not to try to fake you out. Packet Sender is innocuous, it's not malicious, but for the purpose of our lab demo today, you're seeing what we truly originated the traffic with. But let's pretend instead it was a printer update that actually infected this server, and you'll see that here in just a moment. So I grab that file, and somehow I get it off of there, and I FTP it or SMB copy it or whatever, and I'm going to send it to ThreatGrid. So I'm going to send up win32 printerupdate.exe, which is the faked content that I just showed you was Packet Sender on the real server. But this is the binary. I'm going to send it up, and when I do, ThreatGrid is going to analyze it. And in this case, because we've got some malware engineers that can kind of instrument this, we're getting a score of 64, which I think, Nasif, you said is suspicious, but not necessarily malicious, right?
95 will be automatically convicted. But 64, we maybe want to look at the network traffic patterns and HTTP traffic, TCP IP streams that sample opened. But because 95 we know is just good, but again, between that 60 to 95 range, we probably want to take some eyes on that.
I think this is kind of important because we see a compromised server talking to an unknown IP or an IP that is not known to be malicious or good. And we also see a file on there generating the traffic that is not known to be malicious or good either. And this is actually the uncomfortable space we live in the SOC. Where the real investigation is where you have to tie this data together and make a decision. And this is where I'm going to dig into ThreatGrid's analysis of this file. Where else is it connecting? Where did this file come from? How did it get on the system? And because I don't want to just knock the server offline just because I'm suspicious, right?
And in many cases, you may not be able to.
Right, may not be able to. Now, but I do want to blacklist this external IP. This clearly looks like C2 traffic, so I'm going to blacklist it. I'm just going to block it until I can finish my investigation. And I can do that right there in the firewall. Now, I can take that then go over to Umbrella, and when I do, Umbrella says there aren't any domains associated with this, or there's no Umbrella domain to block here. All right, now if we want to do the same thing in threat response, the first thing we're going to do is connect this with Threat Grid. And good news, it's only 2 steps. We're just going to add a module in Threat Grid, tell it which region you want to set it up in, and create that module right there in threat response.
Yeah, let's take a pause there quickly. So Threat Grid is known as a reference module. No enrichment is provided by Threat Grid. You can't also upload directly to Threat Grid. That step that he showed you, that was a manual upload by the investigators going to that server and getting that down from there. We do have requests for us to be able to use the investigation to submit that sample automatically through threat response, but we are not there. But the reference module simply allows you to pivot from the sample, whatever you see, the IP address, to actually see what does Threat Grid know. It formats the URL. You provide your username and credential to log in.
Thank you. Craig.
So I want to point out though that there's you'll see in CTR a module called Public or AMP Global Intel, right? That actually contains all of Threat Grid's convictions, right? That was one of the first things we did. I was also the principal engineer and director of engineering at Threat Grid, so I used my root access to do that. So basically, you are getting Threat Grid data for free in CTR. It's just we're not doing an enrichment lookup yet. It's a case of the cobbler's children having no shoes or API modules.
Thanks, Craig. All right, so Threat Grid is awesome. We've just hooked it up to Threat Response, and now we're going to do this investigation in Threat Response instead of starting at the firewall. Now, one of the ways we're going to do this, now, Nassif told you just a few moments ago that soon you'll have the incident manager, which will take data from the IPS, from that next generation firewall, and feed it in and interact with Cisco Threat Response. Not ready yet, but it's soon, right? I believe within the next couple of months we should have that. So here's something cool, Chrome plugin. Go to Chrome, if you'll just grab that URL right there at the top, cs.co/CTR for Chrome. And I don't know why Ben used that.
This is hidden so far on the Chrome store because we are in beta and we're inviting customers as needed to test it out. We've published the URL here because I think you guys might enjoy this because once you have access to threat response, the way this is going to work is you are going to generate API credentials inside threat response. You are going to then use those credentials and plug them into this particular browser plugin. At that stage, you have now extended threat response to Chrome. Whatever you're looking at in the Chrome browser, you can get dispositions for live directly all day long.
Awesome. So once you install and set that up, here's what you get. Here we are back at the firewall, starting the investigation. We search for Valley's IP address to see who's Valley been talking to. And when we do, we get results in our connection events on the firewall. I can click the Chrome browser plugin. You can see it at the top right. And when I do, it will scan the page for observables. I'm just going to click on and select observables that are just IP addresses that are outside of my controlled address space to look a little further into those. And when I do, I can click Investigate. And by the way, it's giving me a judgment right there, right? It's telling me 9 of those are unknown.
So what happened there was he clicked the one button that said scan for observables. Out of that entire bunch of logs, those were the 14 observables we found. Those were 14 unique elements. There could be 100, but if it's the same IP address over and over, we're going to count it as 1. 14 of those observables. In the same result set, we also gave you the live disposition at this moment in time for what you've seen. RFC 1918 addresses will always show up as unknown. We don't have the disposition for RFC 1918. We used to as an error. We were ingesting certain feeds that we made modifications to. But RFC 1918 will show up as unknown. In this case, Martin decided to ignore our own RFC 1918, select the public unknowns to figure out what's going on here. What does my environment know about this.
And when I do, it has taken those IP addresses and dropped them into Investigate, and it's now giving me a relations graph of activity that has occurred from those IP, or to and from those IPs. Now, if I go in a little further, here I am, after some investigation as a SOC analyst, here I am, I've found that server, that unknown IP address, and I do see a file that is connected to that IP that is associated with my target here, my server. Whoa, where'd you go? All right, so it doesn't like me anymore. But there it is, that purple target over on the right-hand side of the screen. That's that server that we're looking into. We now know there is a file on that server connecting to this unknown IP. All right? So we could then see what ThreatGrid already knows about that file by drilling in, and we could immediately block that in AMP, right from here, right here in ThreatGrid. Excuse me, right here in Threat Response.
Okay.
So what do we know? We had a server that was compromised talking to a command and control system, okay? We can see that there is a file that appears to be malicious that's initiating that connection. Now AMP is going to block that because we put it in a block list, okay? We've blacklisted the malicious IP, and then we're going to need to take that server through an incident response procedure, all right? Which means we may decide to take it offline and rebuild it. We may decide to repair it in place. And we may decide that it is not further compromised and we're ready to leave it where it is.
And we have one last use case before Christopher comes up, and this one should be a fairly common one.
What? I don't.
Talos made a big splash with this one, and go for it, Martin.
Okay. Now, I hope this isn't a common use case.
Well, it's...
But here we have an Internet of Things device, an IoT device that has been infected, right? Now, one of the interesting things, Talos published very recently a blog about VPN Filter. We're actually seeing some updates to VPN Filter. VPN Filter is Linux malware. What's really interesting is in the first stage, it tries to reach out to download its instructions from PhotoBucket, from specific URLs on PhotoBucket. If it can't get to PhotoBucket, it will go to a site called toknowall.com. And then further instructions will follow and will actually use Tor for its later stage communication. So it's really hard to know to actually block that traffic, okay? So we're going to look at threat intel about this just to see if we're affected. We're going to look for those indicators of compromise within our environment, okay? We're going to see if anything's been compromised. If there are, we're going to invoke our IR procedure, and then we'll convict anything else that has been found. So first thing we're going to do is go to go to Talos blog, find indicators, and here we are. So you can see those PhotoBucket URLs, right? That's the first stage of the attack. We also see the domain toknowall.com. We're going to grab those indicators, and we'll just paste them directly into Threat Response this time. Okay, and when we do, we'll start an investigation, and sure enough, we find one target, CentOS Linux 7.5, okay? It appears that it is talking to PhotoBucket. It also appears that it is talking to toknowall.com. So it is talking to the first stage of this attack. When we look at toknowall.com, we can also see sightings, okay? And in these sightings, we note that there has been at least 2 attempts from this device to look it up that's being reported from the Umbrella reporting API.
So to your question earlier about how do you find the time context, if you look at the observe column on that sighting spot, you'll get the timestamp of when we saw those things from the very first time that the API was able to see it.
You'll also see it on this timeline here. All right, so you can see if it's talking a lot. So here we have an infected IoT device, we have a device within our network that is talking to toknowall.com. It is making repeated attempts to talk to it. And we also happen to see the name of the device is our air handling unit. So we know it is an IoT device within our environment.
Okay.
All right, so what are we going to do with that? Well, because we know it's an air handling unit, we want to make sure that domain is blocked, okay? And we can confirm that because we see Umbrella blocking that domain. And the next thing we need to do is simply invoke the IR procedure, probably take that device offline, get it cleaned before we bring it back online.
Okay.
Yes?
Are there any plans to integrate with ICE or cluster?
Yeah.
So glad you said that, because that's exactly what I would want to do here, right?
Yes.
I would want to quarantine this with ice, because here I have an air handling unit that I probably can't just take offline anytime I want, right? Something controlling it. I don't have AMP on there because it's it's an IoT device. The best thing I could do is block the C2 and block the domains and quarantine that device so that it's limited in what further connections it can make. And so we don't have any committed plans to connect with ICE yet, but we will. I believe we will long term.
We like the way you think.
Yeah, that's exactly what we should be doing.
We like the way you think, and when he says there's not anything committed yet because we can't share with you if we don't have a commit date for it, but I can tell you it's probably one of the top asks to have a response module, 2 response modules, block IP and quarantine device. Those are response modules that we are looking to prioritize, and we'll get through that and update you guys once we can solidify that better. Okay, Christopher, it's all yours. This is our special guest speaker that we wanted to bring in here for you, because everything we've shown you now here is available through the API. And what Chris has done is to be able to perform all these investigations using this portfolio at scale. And the use case he's going to show is something that's fairly common, that's going to provide you immediate coverage, and he's going to make it available. You can grab my mic. And Chris, all yours.
So we're going to mic him up. So if what you've seen so far, hey Jim. No, we'll never integrate with StealthWatch. I'm just kidding. StealthWatch is definitely on the menu. StealthWatch Cloud would be next, and following that, StealthWatch Enterprise. And when I'm not even supposed to say there's a difference between the two, but yeah, StealthWatch is something that you'll see coming up in 2019. Yep. And Christopher is miking up, but as he is, I just want to reiterate something. What you've seen so far is through a graphic interface. So this is great, right? You can drop things in, easily get the lay of the land, start to see things integrated. You can block things directly from the product. And that's great one at a time. But wouldn't it be even better if you could speed this whole thing up by using an API to integrate it with your tools and to make things faster? And Christopher's going to show you some stuff I haven't even seen yet, but it sounds really cool. So please, Christopher.
All right. So is the mic working? Yeah? All right. So hi, everyone. My name is Christopher van der Made. I'm a systems engineer specialized in security based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And thanks, Nazif and Martin. I will show you today basically what you can do with the CTR APIs. So we talked a lot about the APIs already. So threat response basically uses all of the various APIs in the backend. But what there's also available is threat response itself as a very rich API that you can leverage, and by doing that, you can take everything together from your script. So what I'll be showing is an example script. I'll actually post the code inside of the WebEx team room when I'm done with my demo. It's an example, and what the example shows you is how you can actually leverage the APIs to integrate it into your workflow. So the specific example is the following. So we've seen the Talos block. We've seen the Talos block with all of these observables in there. So at the end, you have this indication of compromised section with IP addresses. You have domains, URLs, file hashes, etc. So the idea, what I was thinking was, if you have an analyst, I think Martin was the analyst in the example. If you have an analyst, basically what you want to know when you read these blogs is, are we affected, and is it bad? So these 2 questions that you want to answer. Now, what I was thinking, it is possible to use the Chrome plugin to do that, as was shown in the previous slides. But what I was thinking, it's quite nice if you can automate that whole process. So what I've built is a sample script that actually takes the RSS feed, so that's the rich site summary. It's a feed, so for those who don't know what RSS is, you can basically subscribe to blogs and get blog posts from it. You can do that via email, an app, or in your scripts, what I'll be doing today. Oops, my computer went to sleep there. Not yet time to sleep. So what I made is a script that actually parses through this RSS feed And what it will do is when there's a new blog post, it will take that automatically, parse through it, grab the observables which are needed, which you want to do your investigation in, and it automatically creates a casebook. So to do that, let me explain you a couple of concepts, and what I would like to show you is how easy it is to get started with the threat response API. To prove to you that I'm actually adding these cases in there, I just want to prove that there's some random cases at the moment in Casebook. So these are my most recent cases. There has not been any case added yet. So when I run the script in a couple of minutes, this should populate with all of the various blog posts which are in the Talos RSS feed. So if you want to get started with the API, you go over to Modules, and as you can see here already, it says API Clients. So if I click on this, you see that you actually can get started right away. It will tell you to add an API credential and how do the API clients work. So let me first show you this. So this is actually when I click on how does the API work. The API is completely standardized in the way that it uses Swagger, the Swagger framework to build the API and also to publicize it. And it also uses OAuth for the authentication process. So for those that don't know what OAuth is, whenever you use, for example, login with Facebook somewhere, it's actually using OAuth in the backend. So it's a standardized way of giving a token that you're authenticated to use basically that resources. So if you scroll down, here it explains you how to do that, but it also explains you the various API endpoints. So as you can see here, you have the inspect, enrich, response, settings, and OAuth endpoint. Obviously, the OAuth endpoint is the one where you generate a token. So this is one of the first things the script does. What you can do is you can open this in a new tab, and it will explain to you exactly how to do that. I've created scripts for this already. They will be available for you. I'll show them to you in just a second. If you want to play around with them and modify them to your needs, feel free to do so. So what I'm actually also using is the inspect element, and the inspect element is very cool. What this actually is, this is basically the power between, the power of this investigation pane that you have in threat response. As it was shown, you can actually paste a blob of raw text into that investigation pane, basically, and threat response will parse out all of the observables. This is actually the API doing that in the backend. As you can see here, it returns, I'm not sure if it's readable, let me zoom in. It returns extracted observables from some raw text. So this API endpoint takes raw text as an input, and it gives you basically the parsed out observables and the classified observables as an output. So if I give a blog post to this, it can give me the IP addresses, and it will also say, this is an IP address. So we'll immediately classify it as well. And we can use this directly to create casebooks, which brings me to the second API, or the third API endpoint, actually, which is the private Intel API endpoint. This private Intel API endpoint, this one takes a little bit longer to load, but let me explain what it does. This allows you to basically add judgments, and it allows you to integrate this system, your own systems with threat response. So this allows you to basically ingest extra information into your threat response system. What I'll be using, so there are many API endpoints, as you can see here. What I'll be actually using is Casebook, because what I said, I'll be actually, what I'll be doing is I'll be creating a casebook. I'll be automatically parsing the blogs, taking out the observables, and then putting them in a casebook, or in a case in Casebook, I have to say, to be correct. So this is the API endpoint that does that. It's a post request, and it takes in all kinds of information. You can give it a description, etc., a title, and basically it will allow you to create cases in Casebook. So remember here that my casebook is still empty at the moment, or there's some random stuff in there. So I'm not yet doing this. I haven't yet run the script. So if I want to create an API client, to come back to this, you give this a name, for example, think we're in 2433, demo, and we can say select everything. I'll be at least using the casebook and the inspect element and the private intelligent element, so I at least need to check those. But if you just want to do them all and just be careful with your API clients, then that's fine as well. So you can then create an API client. It creates a client ID and a client password. This is what you use to grab the OAuth token. This is the credentials that you need. If you would do that, please be sure to copy your password, because if you click this on close, you will not be able to grab it, and you need to create new credentials. So I won't be using this one. I already created an API client before. And by the way, as you can see on the client on top, the Chrome plugin actually also uses these API credentials. So if you want to use this widget, you need to do that as well. So now let me show you some code. Basically, the script that I made consists of two files. It's a JSON file with some configuration in there. This file basically, as you can see, it includes the client ID and the secret. I'll change these afterwards, so it doesn't matter to copy them. But I also included actually a WebEx token and a WebEx room ID in there as well, because it would be perfect if you're an analyst that you actually get a message like, hey, there's a new blog post, and by the way, I've created a case already in Casebook for you to go directly into your investigation and to see, am I affected, which is the question you want to know. Now, there are two fields which are empty at this point, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the script for the first time. In RSS, so RSS is the way of consuming these blog posts, there you have these two tags, last e tag and last modified. Doesn't make sense to go really in detail, but basically what it allows you to do is if I rerun this script, I can check whether the blog has been updated. And if it has been updated, I can assume there's a new blog post, and I can actually run that part of my script again, because I don't want to have duplicate cases in my casebook. So now let's go to the actual meat of the script. That is the RSS feed to casebook.py file. So I'm using Python to do this, but obviously you can use the API in any language which you would like. Just want to call out one thing, which is this feed parser library which I'm using. I highly recommend using this. It's very easy to basically take the blog posts and do whatever you want with them. And one thing I forgot to mention, this is the actual RSS feed from the Talos blog. There are many RSS feeds out there, so if you have any other one, you can just try it. It should work with any RSS feed. I didn't do any fancy things. The Talos RSS feed is completely standardized, so it should work with any RSS feed. So basically, I'm going to show you a couple of the functions that I've written. So in Python, you have the concept of functions. For those who are new to Python, functions are basically little scripts which you can call later to do a certain task. So this first function, actually what it does, it opens the config file. So it's a bit boring function, but necessary because I'm using a separate file with all the credentials. It stores it as a sort of a variable, as you can see here, which I can use later to grab all of these credentials that I've stored here in the config.json file. Then there's another function called write_config. This is basically when I'm done with parsing off the blog post, I'll write to that file because I want to store that last e tag and the last modified tag so that I'm sure the next time I run the script that I'm not putting in duplicate cases in Casebook, which we don't want. So this function is important. This function is an example of how you can use the OAuth API endpoint from CTR. Basically, as an argument, as you can see here, it takes the client ID and the client secret as an argument. It puts those basically here in the authentication header of my call. And it's very simple. With one line of code, actually, I am requesting an OAuth token. This token allows me to reach all of the other API endpoints. So as you can see here, I'm doing a little bit of error checking. If 200 means everything went OK, and then I'm storing the access token. And this access token I can now use to call the inspect API endpoints, which returns observables, and I can use it to call the casebook API endpoint, which is used to create a case in casebook. So this next one is up for debate, whether you would want this or not. What I noticed is when you parse an entire blog post, there are usually hyperlinks in it to, for example, a news article or something else that Talos mentioned. And if you put those in casebook and you do it, put it in your investigation, you will get a lot of false positives because of that, because probably you have someone who browsed to theguardian.com or whatever, but it's not of interest to you. So what I want is basically only the observables which Talos has put in clear text. So what this function does, it's called clean entry. It takes the description of an entry, of a blog post entry, these are RSS terms. It takes this as an argument, and it basically cleans out all of the hyperlinks. So href is HTML for a hyperlink. Source is usually what's used for an image. So these are just terms, we don't need to go into detail of them. But basically, I'm checking all of the words in the blog. I'm skipping all of those, and all the other words that are left over, I'm putting that into a new list with my new, basically blog post. So I'm adding those together, and then I'm returning them. Now the next one is very interesting. This is the return observables function. This, so the off function, the OAuth function and this function, I mean, you can use them in this context, but you can use them in any script which you would like. So you can just copy paste this. I'll give you the GitHub link and use it in whatever script you would like. What I'm doing here is basically very simple. I am using the access token I created earlier. So as you can see here, putting the access token here. I'm putting that into the authorization header. And what I'm doing is this raw text, which I got from another function later. I'm doing a post request with that, with the raw text. And what it will return is all of the observables. So it's very simple. With a couple of lines of code, I can give it any blob of text, and it will return observables to me. So I can do that in the graphical user interface, as was shown by Nazif and Martin. But this is also a really nice way of doing that. And you can use this in whatever integration you want to build, basically. Again, I'm doing some error checking here just to be sure. If it all went well, we get a 200 back, and I'll return the response.txt, which contains all of the observables in there. Now then the last, or the second to last function is casebook. This actually lets you create a casebook. And here it's actually already, even if you don't know any code, you can actually kind of guess what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a casebook title. I'll mention that it was created by RSS feed. I'll put in a description, and I'll say it's a Python-generated casebook. And I'll actually add the entry/link. And what that actually is, it's the link to the actual blog post. So if I'm as an analyst, so Martin, if you as an analyst got that case, you might want to actually read the blog post if you find a target there. So it's easy to link directly back to the actual blog post from Talos. And what I'm doing then, I'm just creating a JSON format. So here it's still a dictionary, but I'm putting it in JSON, and I'm giving that to the casebook endpoint. So this is that endpoint that I just showed you. And what I'm doing, if all goes well, I'll create a case in casebook with this information in there. And I'll run it in just a second so you can see that. So if that went well, I'm sending a WebEx message, a notification to say, hey, there is a new case. It's been added to your casebook. It's probably time to investigate that. And using the Cisco Spark API library, definitely really easy, with 2 lines of code. So this line and this line, I can write, send a notification to WebEx Teams. That's how easy it is. So it's, just good, basically to make your analyst aware that there's a new blog post and a new case. Now, this is where I'm actually doing the real work. It's a parse RSS feed function. What I'm doing here is I'm going to run through all of the blog posts. They're called entries in the RSS world. And basically, if these two are empty, which they are now, they're empty, it means it's the first time the script runs, because I did not put a last modified or a last e tag in there. That means, well, at least I've chosen to do that, is then to parse through all of the blog posts that are in there and create a case. I won't go into the details here, but basically I'm calling the other functions, returning the observables, etc. And what I'm doing here is whenever these are already filled in, so I've run the script once, I can actually then check whether there has been an update to the blog. And if there's a change detected, I will give a little bit of user feedback, and then I'll go through all of the blogs and check if there's a new blog. So it's a bit in-depth here, but it shows you, basically what I've built. Now, this is where I'm actually executing the code, and here I'm creating the access token, and here I'm calling that function which calls all the other functions. So now the live part of the demo comes up. So let me actually show this. So I've written it in Python 3.6. So if I would run this, you see that the access token was generated. And as you can see, casebook was added. And sometimes there's no new casebook. And why I did that is sometimes the observable, the inspect API endpoint does not return any observables. Sometimes there's a new blog post about their podcast or something. It's not really interesting to post that into a case. So in the WebEx Teams room, now you should be getting actually notifications from this as well. So let me just let it finish, and let me check in the meantime if this is going correctly. As you can see here, whenever there's a new casebook, I'm sending that to this WebEx Teams, and obviously this can be any WebEx Teams room that you want. Maybe it's the space that you and the analyst and the network admins have. Then you know, hey, we need to get to work. So I think it completed running, and as you can see, there were a lot of cases added. Now to quickly show you what would happen if you would run this script multiple times with like a cron job, if I would run it again, it says no changes to the RSS feed detected. And that has all to do with that I now filled in, the last e tag and the last modified items. So now, let's check if this actually worked. And let's go into casebook here, and let's refresh this. And as you can see, all of a sudden, the new cases have been added. So it took a little bit of work. I actually built this over Christmas as a little puzzle for myself. The code is all out there. I'll post it in a second inside of that room. It's all on GitHub. So let me actually, I can show you the GitHub real quick. It's the wrong one. So it's this GitHub, and I explained completely how to install this, etc. So it should be very easy to install this yourself. So the code is in there. And one last thing, what I would like to know now, for example, if I would look at these, is I would grab one of the, whoops. Obviously this is now. If I would click one of these cases that I've created, I can actually see now here on the notes, I have the link to the actual original blog post. So if I click on this, it brings me to the original blog post, which is sometimes important. So you see here, PyLucky ransomware. And the question you want to know, we know it's malicious. Are we affected? So what if I click on this, and with that, we can now run for a little bit. We can see that there's an actual target. And that's what we want to know in the end, this target. And actually, it's Elizabeth's MacBook, which is my mother, and I asked her this morning to click on this domain so that I would have a target for this demo. With that, I would like to give it back to you, Martin, and Nazif.
Nicely done.
No problem. Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, so that concludes our discussion. What we've talked about today is how to hunt for threats in your environment with any of these products. We've talked about AMP, Umbrella, Threat Grid, ESA, and your next-gen firewall. All of them integrate with Cisco Threat Response, but we've showed you how to do threat investigations in both the product and with Threat Response. And then on top of that, within the WebEx Teams room now, you have a link to the GitHub that will allow you to set up this API integration. You can take that back with you and integrate this into your own workflow for security operations centers. So with that, I would like to invite you, one of the things I didn't make plain to everyone, but I would ask you to note, Cisco Threat Response, just Google it, but visibility.amp.cisco.com. That is the link, visibility.amp.cisco.com. Safari redirects, but yeah, gotcha.
North American link.
Yeah, that's the North America. There's an EU version as well and an APJC version as well, and you can Google for those. But what I would also note is that your AMP credentials already work. Your Threat Grid credentials already work. If you need credentials beyond that, if you'll email me, diddley@cisco.com, you can see it at the bottom of the slide, or go to the WebEx Teams room, which is even better. I'll help you get set up with an account for early access to get started. All right?
The only caveat on the AMP account, you have to be an AMP admin today. So you've got to have the administrative privileges in AMP to be able to log into Threat Response. Threat Grid, you don't need. Hey, Ben. Threat Grid, you don't need that. I believe we've got plans to have a regular user from AMP log into Threat Response too. But just heads up on that.
So get on WebEx Teams, fill out your survey. Actually, the survey and Teams is a good place to give us feedback and kind of let us know, as product management, what you want to do with this product and what questions you have. We would also point you to some related sessions. Certainly, Aaron Woland has a great session in this list. There are a number of others. This, again, is in your PDF to take with you that would allow you to get more information on this. And with that said, we've got a couple of minutes for questions. And we do have that microphone around here somewhere. Craig has it. So questions, or even just feedback about, hey, you guys should do this with the product, okay? And we're here to hear any of that.
I've already asked the question into the team session, but is there any plan to have on-prem CTR? Because in our environment...
There's the man. Ask him right there.
Is there any plan to have on-premise CTR?
So right now, nothing on the roadmap. In terms of architecture, yeah, it's something that could be shrunk down and fit on a box. We did the same thing with Threat Grid. We built it to be in cloud or on-prem. So same thing there. It's just, it's one of those things that's a matter of demand. And I expect that to happen, at some point.
That's why I'm asking twice.
Okay.
Keep asking until you get it. So here's a question here.
Thanks. Any chance to see log ingestion from third-party devices and UBA?
What was that one, the last one?
User behavior analytics?
User behavior analytics and log ingestion from third parties.
So the question is about log ingestion. Okay, so actually, in general, while we can represent that data in CTR, or Cisco Threat Response, that's not the intended target for it. You could use the scripting API to dump things in there, but you're really going to alienate my operations team when you do that. It's not meant to be a SIM replacement or to be a log collector. It's meant to be that data is meant to be for your working set of your investigations. So something like that would be, for instance, with the NGFW, they're building a cloud event service, right? And then we would have an enrichment API to talk to that. Or they would be, StealthWatch Cloud, right? It collects logs from all your cloud system, like your Amazon logs, et cetera. And then it's that system of record, and then we would query it. So it's not, we're never going to be a SIM, like a sink for all the log data.
Thank you. And we'll do one more question, and then we'll have you come up if you want. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I understand the answer to the previous question, but the question more goes, is it possible to study to consume to observables? Just do the query to the AMP console, to the thread grid, to whatever. Is it possible to study it in a way that it will query the observables from other systems like the SIM? or the Office 365? So that would be the question.
All right, so the question is, can we set it to do what we call the enrichment query, like ask questions of other systems like Office 365, or basically have third-party enrichment sources, right? The answer is yes, that is part of our roadmap. And that's actually what we're building is what we call the Relay API, where we can give you a spec, right? A Swagger definition. Someone like that other service would have to implement that API, right? And it could be some other, some system that's acting as a shim or a gateway, and then it would be able to query and get data back. So yes, our intent for everything in CTR, right? The core is open source. All of the like you see the APIs are all available, and we also want to have enrichment modules, everything be open to third parties. That is an absolute requirement. So, and it's also a priority, and it is committed on roadmap. We just did the API, the consumption API first. Now we're doing our first development project with a test partner for the third-party enrichment modules.
Thank you. So I think let's conclude here, and we'll be here for your questions. But I do want to thank you for coming and just advise you to go back and get started with this, right? Connect it, use some of these techniques to hunt for threats in your own environment and see how it fits together. Thank you, Craig, for being here. Thank you, Christopher, for being here. And thank you all for being here.